It was 2:07 a.m. when I saw her silhouette crouching by my dock spray can in hand, turning my Navy patrol boat into a crime scene. My heart slammed in my chest as I froze behind the curtain. Bright red paint streaked across the hull like open wounds. She didn't just write words, she carved junk in letters taller than my knees, smashing my navigation lights with a crowbar like a deranged executioner. That woman, Charlotte Prescott, president of our HOA and self-proclaimed queen of Shoreline Estates, thought she was untouchable. For years, she ruled this neighborhood like a petty dictator, bending every rule to her will. But this time, she crossed the wrong man. That boat wasn't an eyesore. It was my memorial, a piece of steel holding the last memories of two brothers in arms who never made it home. And now it was bleeding red under a Florida moon because some control-obsessed tyrant decided her view mattered more than my grief. I stood there shaking phone in one hand, rage in the other, and thought, "You just declared war, Charlotte, and I'm going to make sure you regret every second of it." The morning after that attack, the smell of fresh spray paint still clung to the salty breeze as I walked down to my dock. What I saw turned my stomach, shattered glass glinting like tiny shards of ice across the planks, deep gouges carved into the hull, and that word junk screamed across my boat like a scarlet insult. For a few seconds, I couldn't even process it. My coffee slipped from my hands and exploded on the wood-dark liquid, spreading like blood around my bare feet. That boat wasn't just a vessel, it was them. It was Tommy's laugh echoing across Somali waters. It was Marcus humming under his breath while polishing brass fittings before a storm rolled in. It was 12 years of my life and the weight of two names etched into my soul. And now it looked like a corpse someone had desecrated for fun. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures, every slash, every dent, every hateful letter. And then I saw it, a glint near the stern. I crouched down, heart pounding, and picked up a pair of leather gloves. Buttery, soft designer stitching, the kind you only buy when you've never worried about a grocery bill. They were smeared with red paint. And I knew. There wasn't a doubt in my mind whose perfectly manicured hands those gloves belonged to. Charlotte Prescott, HOA president, 52 years old, three-story mansion on the corner lot, hair so shellacked it could survive a hurricane without moving an inch. A woman who treated HOA bylaws like gospel and everyone else like sinners. 3 weeks ago, Charlotte had sent me a letter printed on embossed paper with her signature swooping across the bottom like she was signing a peace treaty. It demanded that I remove an unsightly, rusting vessel from my property because it violated community aesthetic standards. She gave me 30 days to comply or face escalating fines. I tried to reason with her, walked right up to her palace of stucco and glass with a smile plastered on my face and said, "Charlotte, that boat's legal, registered. It's sitting on my dock, my property." I even explained what it meant to me, hoping maybe there was a shred of humanity under that Botox smile. Her response, a condescending chuckle, "And Mr. Walker's Shoreline Estates is a respectable neighborhood. We have standards. That rust bucket isn't a memorial, it's a junkyard attraction, and it's tanking property values for everyone." I wanted to snap back, wanted to tell her she had no idea what that boat represented. But instead, I walked away thinking reason would win. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, she turned my dock into a war zone. And when I emailed her that night, with photos of the damage and a polite request for $9,000 in repairs complete with close-ups of those designer gloves, I got a reply dripping with false innocence. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Perhaps you should invest in better security for your junk pile." That was it. No remorse, no denial worth believing, just smug arrogance radiating through the screen. But the next morning, fate delivered my smoking gun. Hector Morales, my neighbor 2 houses down, showed up at my door with a grin so wide I thought he'd won the lottery. "Ethan, you gotta see this," he said, dragging me to his garage. He pointed at his security monitor, and there it was. Charlotte herself, dressed head to toe in black, like some deranged cat burglar, creeping around my boat at 2:13 a.m., spray painting. Swinging that crowbar, dropping those gloves like a calling card. High-definition evidence complete with timestamp. I exhaled for what felt like the first time since I saw my boat bleeding red. "You just handed me a nuke, Hector." But Charlotte wasn't the kind to back down. 3 days later, another letter landed in my mailbox, HOA notice, demanding I pay a $500 fine for failing to maintain property in accordance with community harmony standards. Harmony. That word tasted like poison. She was using the rulebook as a weapon, doubling down instead of backing off. Then came the real bombshell. A property survey slid into my mailbox claiming my dock wasn't even mine, that my property line ended 15 feet before the water, which meant, according to this official document, my boat was sitting on community property. The survey looked legit with signatures and seals, but I knew my deed backward and forward. I compared the two, and it hit me like a rogue wave. This wasn't a mistake. This was fraud. Someone had shifted the lines to steal my waterfront. Someone. Yeah, right. We both knew who. That night I called the one person I trusted to help me fight this: Grace Bennett, a city planning legal analyst who'd grown up busting HOA tyrants for fun. When she saw the fake survey next to the real one, her eyes narrowed. Whoever did this committed felony-level fraud, Ethan. We're talking forgery, conspiracy, the works. The question is, can we tie it to Charlotte? Oh, we will, I told her, staring out at my wounded boat. We're going to do more than tie it. We're going to make sure she never does this to anyone again. Because this wasn't just about a boat anymore. It was about power. About one woman thinking she could bend the law, ruin reputations, and crush lives because she had money and a title. And if she wanted a war, I was ready to fight like hell. I thought the video footage would end it. I thought the gloves, the spray paint, the timestamp would be the checkmate that sent Charlotte crawling into whatever designer hole she'd slithered out of. I was wrong. 3 days after Grace and I filed our preliminary complaint, I woke up to chaos again. Not on my dock this time, but on my phone. Missed calls, voicemails, emails stacked like cordwood, clients, colleagues, old Navy buddies, all demanding answers. Apparently, someone had launched a smear campaign overnight, plastering every marine contractor forum, boating association board, and professional network with one headline: Ethan Walker under investigation for fraudulent business practices. There were screenshots of official documents, state seals, case numbers, even a bogus letter claiming my contractor's license had been revoked for gross negligence and repeated environmental violations. By the time I finished reading the first post, my stomach was in freefall. Peterson Marine, a company that had just hired me for a $50,000 yacht restoration, left a voicemail. Ethan, until this clears up, we have to freeze the project. Company policy. I'm sorry, man. Sorry, that word burned like acid. This wasn't an accident. This was strategic. Charlotte had gone nuclear. I called Grace, pacing my living room like a caged animal. She's torching my career, I said, my voice breaking on the edges. She's not just after the boat, she wants to ruin me. Grace exhaled sharply. Then we don't play defense anymore. We hit back. But before we could hit back, I needed proof. And the first breadcrumb came from an unexpected source: Tyler Prescott, Charlotte's 19-year-old nephew. I'd seen him lurking around the marina before, skinny kid, nervous eyes, always checking over his shoulder. That day I spotted him leaning against the bait shop, chewing his lip raw. When I walked up and said, "Rough morning," he nearly jumped out of his sneakers. Yeah, just college stuff," he stammered, avoiding my eyes. "Funny," I said casually, "because I've been wondering who helped your aunt at 2 a.m. the night my boat got trashed." His face drained of color. He muttered something about being late and bolted like a spooked deer. But that panic, that was gold. That night I came back with a metal detector and combed the sandy soil near the dock. After 2 hours, I found it a flashlight engraved with C. Prescott in elegant script, paint smeared and half buried under a plank. Evidence doesn't get more poetic than that. I texted Grace a photo. Her reply came fast: "Bag it. Don't touch the paint. This is leverage." But leverage wasn't enough. We needed an inside witness. And Tyler was cracking. The next time I saw him, I laid the flashlight on the counter between us at the bait shop. His hands shook so hard I thought he'd drop his Red Bull. "Look, man," I said quietly, "I'm not here to ruin your life. But your aunt, she's setting you up to take the fall. You think she won't think again?" That did it. His mouth opened, and the truth poured out like water from a busted dam. Charlotte had threatened him, promised to pay his tuition if he kept quiet, threatened to ruin his parents financially if he didn't obey. And what she wanted wasn't just vandalism. "She asked me to plant drugs in your truck," he whispered, eyes glistening. "And she talked about setting fire to your engine room. Said it would make her environmental claims easier to prove." I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles went white. Arson. She was planning arson. I recorded everything. Tyler's voice trembling as he confessed to acting as lookout during the vandalism. His fear when he described how deep her threats ran. And then he said something that chilled me to the bone. She's not done, Ethan. She's planning something bigger, like legal stuff, fake permits, code violations. She's got a guy who forges anything she wants. He's already done surveys and inspection reports for her before. The puzzle pieces clicked so fast it made my head spin. The fake property survey. The bogus environmental violation that showed up 2 days earlier. The inspector's signature that looked legit until Grace cross-checked his record and found 2 prior suspensions for ethics violations. This wasn't just a neighborhood feud anymore. This was organized fraud, and Charlotte was the general commanding an army of lies. Grace went into overdrive digging through HOA financials, while I focused on stabilizing my business if that was even possible. But every hour brought more fallout clients, canceling whispers, spreading like oil on water. By Friday, I'd lost $80,000 in contracts and was staring down a court injunction Charlotte filed to have my boat seized for environmental risk. That hearing was scheduled for Monday. If the judge bought her story, my boat, the last piece of Tommy and Marcus I had, would be gone forever. I sat on that boat Friday night, the salt wind stinging my face, and made a promise under the stars. You want war, Charlotte, you've got one. And I'm bringing everything I've got. Saturday morning, I woke up with a different fire in my gut. Up until now, I'd been reacting, scrambling to patch holes while Charlotte drilled more into my life. But that stops today. If the Navy taught me one thing, it's this: when you're under attack, don't just absorb hits. Strike back hard and smart. First move, evidence consolidation. Hector and I spent the day cataloging everything: his security footage, high-resolution stills from multiple angles, timestamps synced with cell tower pings. We uploaded them to 3 separate encrypted drives. Redundancy saves lives in combat and in court. Then came the physical proof: the gloves and the engraved flashlight, stored in airtight bags like crime scene relics. Tyler's recorded confession backed up twice and uploaded to a secure cloud server with a time-stamped chain of custody Grace helped me draft. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was building an unbreakable legal fortress. But I needed more than evidence. I needed the neighborhood on my side. For months, Charlotte had ruled through fear, weaponizing HOA bylaws, bleeding people with fines, threatening lawsuits until they folded. People whispered about her, sure, but no one ever fought back. That ends now. Hector and I started discreetly reaching out to residents we trusted, people Charlotte had wronged. Margaret from Lot 12, who'd been fined $500 for planting unauthorized rose bushes. Robert, forced to repaint his entire house because she claimed the shade was off-brand. And Walter, a retired accountant, who everyone thought was harmless until he opened a manila folder that nearly made my jaw hit the floor. Inside, 5 years of financial statements from the HOA. Spreadsheets color-coded like a war map. She's been stealing from the maintenance fund, Walter said calmly, sipping his tea like we weren't staring at evidence of felony embezzlement. Luxury spa charges, first-class flights, even her tennis lessons. It's all here. How much, I asked, throat dry. 200 grand minimum, he said. And that's being conservative. That was the moment everything shifted. This wasn't just personal anymore. Charlotte wasn't a petty dictator. She was a white-collar criminal bleeding an entire community dry while torching anyone who questioned her. Grace nearly jumped through the phone when I told her. Ethan, this changes everything. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, that's a RICO-level case. We're not just defending your boat, we're dismantling an empire. But time wasn't on our side. Monday's hearing loomed like a storm front, and Charlotte was moving faster than ever. That afternoon, a county inspector showed up waving a violation notice claiming my boat was leaking fuel into the water, an environmental hazard requiring immediate removal. Total fiction. My tanks were bone-dry, sealed tighter than a submarine hatch. But that didn't matter to the clipboard cowboy writing citations like raffle tickets. Grace dug deeper and discovered the inspector had a history, 2 suspensions for falsifying reports. And guess who his biggest consulting client was? Prescott Construction, Charlotte's husband's company. The corruption ran like roots under the whole damn neighborhood, and I was about to rip the tree out by the roots. That night, we launched Operation Full Exposure. Hector edited a video montage security footage of Charlotte vandalizing my boat side by side with photos of her smiling at HOA meetings. Tyler's audio confession layered over shots of the fake survey and the fraudulent environmental report. I narrated the whole thing like a mission briefing, laying out the timeline, the evidence, the financial crimes Walter uncovered. At 9:00 a.m., sharp on Sunday, I posted it to the community forum with one headline: "The truth about your HOA president, video evidence inside." The reaction was nuclear. Within an hour, the post had 100 comments. By noon, 200. People shared their own horror stories, unjust fines, threats, mysterious vandalism. Charlotte's power cracked like thin ice under heavy boots. For the first time, people weren't whispering, they were shouting. By sunset, half the neighborhood had signed a petition demanding her immediate resignation. The other half was emailing the county attorney. Charlotte tried damage control, posted some canned nonsense about smear campaigns and disgruntled residents. But the footage didn't lie. Neither did the bank statements Walter uploaded as Exhibit A. Sunday night, I sat on my boat's deck, watching the tide roll in, feeling something I hadn't in weeks: hope. Real, bone-deep hope. For the first time since this war started, I wasn't fighting alone. This wasn't just me versus Charlotte anymore. It was an uprising. And Monday was Judgment Day. I stared at the courthouse ceiling that night and thought about Tommy and Marcus, their laughter in the galley, their steady hands in storms. I could almost hear Tommy's voice. "You hold the line, Walker, no matter what." Yeah, I was holding it, and tomorrow I was going to push forward. Monday morning, the courthouse smelled like cold marble and stale coffee, a scent I'll forever associate with war, fought in suits instead of uniforms. I walked in wearing the only tailored jacket I owned, evidence box under one arm like a shield. Grace flanked me sharp and focused her phone, buzzing with last-minute updates. Hector was behind us, clutching backup drives like they were holy relics. And then I saw her, Charlotte Prescott. She didn't just walk into that courtroom, she arrived. Designer suit crisp enough to slice, bread diamond tennis bracelet flashing like a beacon of arrogance. She smirked when her eyes met mine like this was a charity gala and not a hearing that could strip her of everything. Her lawyer, a woman in a power red blazer with cheekbones sharp enough to draw blood, greeted us with a glance that said, "You're dead already." I'd seen that look before on enemy commanders who thought superior numbers guaranteed victory. They always underestimated the one man who'd rather die than retreat. The judge, a silver-haired woman with a stare that could freeze lava, called the hearing to order. Charlotte's team came out swinging. They had charts, glossy photographs of my boat from angles that made it look like a derelict hulk, and environmental reports claiming my vessel leaked contaminants into shoreline's pristine waters. Their argument was a well-oiled machine. My boat endangered marine life, posed fire hazards, violated HOA bylaws, and single-handedly lowered property values by 10%. They even called a neighbor, Deborah from Lot 8, to testify she couldn't enjoy her sunset view because of that rusted monstrosity. I could feel my pulse pounding, but Grace squeezed my arm and stepped up when it was our turn. Her voice was calm steel as she dismantled their case brick by brick. "Your Honor," she said, clicking the first slide of our presentation. Hector's high-def footage filled the screen. Charlotte in black, crouching like a cat burglar, spray painting my hull. The courtroom went dead silent except for the sound of her own crowbar smashing my navigation lights in glorious 1080p. Next slide, the engraved flashlight in designer gloves photographed and bagged with timestamps. Then Tyler's sworn affidavit, Charlotte's own nephew admitting she ordered him to assist in the vandalism and threatened his family to ensure silence. Grace wasn't done. She brought out the fake property survey, highlighting discrepancies in bold red. And here she said, voice dripping with lethal precision, is evidence the defendant attempted real estate fraud to fabricate community ownership of land, clearly deeded to my client. Charlotte's lawyer objected again, but the judge shut her down like swatting flies. Then came the killing blow, financial records Walter provided showing $213, $742 siphoned from HOA funds under Charlotte's signature. Spa trips, luxury vacations, a 5-figure charge at a boutique in Palm Beach, labeled community improvement. The judge's eyebrows climbed so high I thought they'd leave her forehead. When Grace rested our case, you could feel the shift in the room. Charlotte, who had walked in dripping confidence, now sat stiff and pale, her hands clenched in her lap. But still she didn't break. Not yet. The judge leaned forward, steepling her fingers. "Mrs. Prescott," she said evenly, "before I rule, do you have anything to say?" That was when Charlotte detonated. She shot to her feet and unleashed a tirade so venomous it would have made a rattlesnake blush. She called me a pathetic crybaby, accused Tyler of being a lying little degenerate, and spat out that my boat deserved to be destroyed. Her lawyer's face went the color of chalk. The judge banged her gavel so hard it echoed like gunfire. When the dust settled, the ruling came swift and brutal. All HOA claims dismissed with prejudice. Charlotte ordered to pay full restitution for damages to my boat, plus legal fees totaling $9,000 immediately. Case referred to the state attorney for investigation into financial misconduct, property fraud, and criminal conspiracy. The gavel hit, and just like that, Charlotte's empire cracked wide open. But here's the kicker: even as she stormed out, head high like a queen stripped of her crown, I knew this wasn't over. Grace leaned close and whispered, "Ethan, you realize we just opened Pandora's box. This isn't civil anymore. This is criminal." She was right. And the door that just swung open, it was big enough to drive a Navy destroyer through. Walter was waiting outside with a grim smile. "You ready to bring her whole castle down?" he asked, tapping that manila folder stuffed with even more financial evidence. I looked out at the courthouse steps, sunlight blazing on marble like a battlefield under a noonday sun, and felt the adrenaline hit like a tidal wave. "Ready," I said. "Walter, I've never been more ready in my life. Because this wasn't just about saving a boat anymore. It was about saving an entire neighborhood and making damn sure Charlotte Prescott never had power over anyone again." The courthouse victory felt good, but it was hollowed by a hard truth: Charlotte wasn't beaten. Not really. People like her don't just slink away quietly. They regroup. They retaliate. And she wasted no time proving me right. The morning after the hearing, my phone lit up like a distress flare. Calls, texts, emails, all variations of the same gut punch. "Ethan, what's going on with your licenses?" Someone, gee, I wonder who had posted on every major marine contractor forum, claiming I'd lost my state certifications for gross negligence and unsafe practices. The post came with forged letters, bearing official seals, fake case numbers, and a level of detail that would fool anyone without direct access to state records. By noon, 2 long-term clients had canceled. By 3:10 p.m., a $50,000 yacht restoration evaporated. Years of reputation torpedoed in hours. I called Grace, my voice shaking with barely leashed fury. "She's killing my livelihood now." Grace cursed under her breath. "I'll escalate this to the licensing board." "But Ethan, this proves she's desperate. Desperation makes people sloppy. We use that." She was right. And something inside me shifted. The man who once just wanted peace, quiet mornings on the dock, coffee in hand, was gone. In his place stood someone harder, sharper, willing to fight fire with a tactical nuke if necessary. I spent that night crafting a battle plan like I was back in ops. Tiered objectives, chain of evidence, contingencies stacked like dominoes. This wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about annihilating Charlotte's ability to harm anyone again. The first domino fell when Walter showed up at my door with a folder thicker than a Navy manual. Inside, 5 years of HOA financial records, annotated with his accountant's precision. Patterns of skimming so blatant they practically scream felony. Charlotte had billed $213 $742 in community enhancements that somehow translated into spa packages, designer wardrobes, and luxury getaways. She'd been bleeding the neighborhood dry while lecturing us about aesthetic integrity. Ethan, Walter said, his voice calm but electric with purpose. "She's not just a bully, she's a criminal. And criminals leave trails. We fed every scrap into Grace's system. She cross-referenced bank statements with vendor records, highlighting shell companies Charlotte used to launder HOA funds. Each discovery tightened the noose. Then came Tyler. Poor kid looked like a ghost when he knocked on my door at sunset. His voice cracked as he spilled the full truth, things that made the vandalism look like a playground prank. "She made me do worse," he whispered, eyes wet. slashed tires, dumped trash on lawns, even told me to sabotage Maria Santos's sprinkler system because she ran against her for HOA president. But the real gut punch, Charlotte had planned to plant drugs in my truck. And when Tyler balked, she suggested arson. Arson. She wanted to torch my boat. Make her environmental lie a self-fulfilling prophecy. I couldn't do it, Tyler said, tears streaking his face. But she said if I didn't, she'd foreclose on my parents' mortgage. She owns it. Bought it through some LLC. That's when I realized just how deep her web ran. She wasn't just using rules as weapons, she was leveraging financial chokeholds on families to build an empire of fear. Tyler signed a full affidavit and agreed to testify. Grace's eyes burned with determination when she read it. This isn't just civil anymore, she said. This is racketeering, extortion. We're talking organized crime statutes. By the end of that week, we had a case file that could sink a battleship. But it wasn't enough to me. I didn't just want justice on paper. I wanted Charlotte exposed so thoroughly that every HOA tyrant in the state would think twice before pulling the same stunts. So we went public again, this time with everything. Tyler's confession, the forged survey, the fake violation reports, the forensic accounting Walter compiled like a maestro conducting a symphony of damning numbers. And Hector. He edited it all into a documentary-length expose that hit the community forum like a precision airstrike. Within 24 hours, the story jumped to local news. 2 days later, regional outlets picked it up. Headlines screamed, HOA president under criminal investigation for fraud extortion. Charlotte tried spinning it, claimed she was the victim of a smear campaign orchestrated by a disgruntled veteran with anger issues. Cute narrative. Too bad it collapsed under the weight of video evidence showing her in full-on ninja mode with a spray can and crowbar. The arrest warrant came a week later. Detective Rodriguez called me personally. Ethan, she said, her voice crackling with satisfaction. We're moving in on her Tuesday morning. Thought you'd want to know. Damn right I wanted to know. I stood on my dock that night, whined, tugging at my hair, and let the reality sink in. This wasn't just about a boat anymore. It was about reclaiming something bigger. My dignity, my livelihood, my community's freedom from a tyrant. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a man under siege. I felt like a commander standing on the deck before a battle I knew I was going to win. The day of the arrest was Florida sunshine and salt air, a picture-perfect morning that made the chaos of the last few months feel almost unreal. I was sitting on the deck of my boat, coffee steaming in my hands, when the text came from Detective Rodriguez. It's happening. Country Club. Bring that camera-ready smile. I didn't need to ask why she chose the club. It was Charlotte's Temple, her weekly tennis match with Bayside's elite. And Rodriguez wanted witnesses. Lots of them. By the time the news hit my feed, the community forum had already exploded with whispers. They cuffed her in the middle of the court. She screamed for the mayor like that would help. Someone even posted a blurry photo, Charlotte Prescott, Queen of Shoreline Estates hands, zip-tied behind her back hair, yanked into an unflattering ponytail, being marched off the court in a neon orange skirt. The irony was delicious. I almost felt sorry for her, almost. But then I remembered standing barefoot on my dock, staring at that word junk bleeding across my memorial, and my pity burned away like fog in the sun. Charlotte's charges hit the evening news before she made it to booking: grand theft, fraud, forgery, racketeering, extortion, conspiracy to commit arson. The DA didn't hold back. And thanks to Tyler's testimony, the case was airtight. The kid didn't just testify. He purged his soul in front of detectives, detailing every dirty trick Charlotte had orchestrated for 2 years. Every tire slashed, every mailbox trashed, every life she crushed to feed her empire of fear. When the cameras rolled that night, Bayside Cove wasn't a neighborhood anymore. It was a battlefield reclaimed. People who'd barely nodded at each other for years now swapped war stories like veterans at a reunion. Margaret brought cookies to Hector's porch. Robert hugged Walter so hard the old man nearly dropped his manila folder. For the first time since I moved here, Shoreline felt like a community, not a kingdom under one woman's thumb. And my boat, the eyesore Charlotte fought so hard to destroy, it became a landmark. Kids came down with their parents asking to see the famous Navy boat. I started giving impromptu tours, telling stories of Tommy and Marcus, the brothers who never made it home. Funny thing, what Charlotte tried to erase became the very thing that brought people together. The restitution money she was ordered to pay didn't just fix the damage, it funded a full restoration. Fresh gray paint, polished brass fittings, new navigation gear. She gleamed like the day she left the yard, a floating memorial reborn from spite and fire. 6 months later, I hosted a community barbecue on her deck. Smoke curled into a sunset sky painted in gold, and crimson laughter rolled across the water, and plates piled high with Hector's legendary grilled snapper clattered on tables. Grace raised a glass and said to Ethan for reminding us that one voice backed by truth can topple an empire. I felt heat climb my neck, but I stood anyway. Looked at the faces, Margaret, Robert, Walter, even Tyler, who was working through his penance with humility and grit, and I said the only words that mattered. This wasn't just me, it was all of us. Charlotte thrived because we stayed silent. The moment we stood together, she fell. Never forget that. The cheer that followed felt like the crack of a Liberty Bell in my chest. Later, when the crowd thinned and twilight draped the marina in velvet, I sat alone at the helm. Ran my fingers over the smooth metal of the restored controls. Thought about every storm I'd weathered on the ocean and on land, and heard Tommy's voice again. Hold the line, Walker, no matter what. I held it, boys. And then some. If there's a lesson in all this, it's simple. Bullies count on your silence. They weaponize fear and isolation. But the second you refuse to bow, the second you pull truth into the light, they crumble, because power built on intimidation is paper thin. Charlotte Prescott learned that the hard way. And as she stares at gray prison walls instead of manicured lawns, I hope she thinks about the irony. She tried to destroy a boat. Instead, she built a fleet of people who'll never let tyranny dock in their harbor again. When I look back, the greatest battle wasn't against Charlotte, it was against fear. Fear that speaking up would make things worse. Fear that fighting back would cost me everything. That fear almost kept me silent. But here's the truth, silence is a gift to bullies. They thrive on it. They count on you thinking you're alone, that nobody will stand with you. The moment you refuse to play by those rules, the moment you pull truth out of the shadows, they lose. This wasn't about a boat, it was about dignity. About drawing a line in the sand and saying, not today, not ever. My Navy brothers taught me that principle on the high seas, and it applies just as much on dry land. You hold the line for what matters, even when the waves hit hard. So if someone's trampling your rights, remember this: justice isn't passive. It's loud, it's relentless, and it starts with one person brave enough to take the first step. Maybe your battle isn't with an HOA tyrant. Maybe it's a boss who crosses the line, a landlord playing dirty, or a neighbor making your life miserable. The strategy's the same: document everything. Gather evidence. Build allies. And never ever fight fire with silence. Start small, record dates, times, and incidents. Take photos. Back up emails. When you're ready, escalate strategically, consult legal help. Go public if necessary, and lean on your community. You'd be surprised how many people are waiting for someone else to take the first swing. Remember, power rooted in fear collapses under exposure. All it takes is persistence and the courage to act. Because the day you decide enough is the day the tide turns,